Hi everyone. We are going to go through these figurative language notes. So if you will please follow along and fill out with me as we go. So figurative language is something that you've probably already heard of. It is a way for writers to enhance their writing to make it more vivid, make it more interesting, make it more catchy, and really just to engage the reader with the text. It is something that I think that great writers do really well, and it's also something that we are going to see a lot in the honest truth. So we want to go through these to begin with, so you can pick up on some of that figurative language as we read the honest truth, and hopefully then you'll be able to write it as well. So let's go ahead and start with alliteration. Okay, so in alliteration, it is the repetition of the same sound at the beginning of words or phrases that are close together. Okay, so at the beginning, not at the end, it has to be at the beginning. An example is Sally sells seashells by the seashore. So the repetition is this sound. So this one over and over. So when you're thinking about is it alliteration or not, usually we're looking for the rule of three. 3 or more times you hear the same sound within a sentence or a line, maybe a line in poetry. So that's alliteration. So next up, we're going to talk about hyperbole. It is not hyperbole, it is hyperbole. And a hyperbole is something that is exaggeration. You could have heard of it as an extreme exaggeration, but it is something that is exaggerated, okay? So a good example is my homework took years to finish. The reason why it's an exaggeration is because your homework literally did not take years to finish. It felt like it took a very long time. However, it might have just taken you 20 minutes or 2 hours. And if it goes slow, it definitely can feel like it took years, but it actually did not take you years. So that is what we call an exaggeration. Another one could be, I'm so hungry I ate a whole horse. And a lot of times people use that hyperbole to say that they are starving. But you literally can't eat a whole horse. That's not humanly possible. For those of you that want to argue, I promise you, it is not humanly possible. Okay, so let's talk about metaphors. Metaphors tend to be one of the types that people get wrong because they actually confuse them with similes. So let's go through what a metaphor is. So a metaphor is comparing two unlike things without using like or as. Okay, so metaphors do not use like or as, and metaphors are often harder to identify. So I'm just going to say harder to identify. So an example is, the room was an oven during the summer. Okay, so it is comparing the room, so the classroom or the bedroom, whatever room, it's comparing the room's temperature to the temperature of an oven. So it is basically saying that it is so hot. The room is very hot. So instead of saying the room is very hot, the writer could say the room was an oven during that certain season of time. Okay? That also can double dip into a hyperbole too. The room is literally not an oven. It's just really hot. We all know what that feels like. So metaphor, I always like to say, has a sister. And the sister is a little bit different, and she's usually easier to identify in writing. And the sister is simile. So this is when we are comparing two unlike things using like or as. So we use like or as to compare two unlike things. So for example, the girl was as quiet as a mouse. Okay, so right here is where we can tell where the simile is. It uses this, okay? And it is comparing a girl's volume to the volume of a mouse. So that's what it's comparing. It's saying the girl has a very tiny, tiny voice like a mouse has. Okay, just to be clear, though, not every sentence that uses like or as is a simile. So you really have to make sure you're figuring out, is it comparing two unlike things together? Okay. All right. Next up is the word onomatopoeia, one of the hardest words to spell in my opinion. Onomatopoeia. You probably have learned these and you've seen these. These are words that it imitates the sound associated with it. So a lot of times we think of comic book words, okay? Like slam, boom, crash. You can do ring, like someone's ringing the phone. Those are all examples of onomatopoeia. Again, we kind of see them in the ways of like comic books, but it's any time a word is imitating the sound of whatever is happening. Okay? Like if someone like says like honk, like they're honking a horn, that could be considered an onomatopoeia. All right. The last one is personification, probably one of my favorite types of figurative language because I think it's so clever. So personification is giving something human qualities. And I'm just going to say often a non-human object. So the idea is that we're giving a non-human object human qualities. So for example, the trees danced in the wind. Okay? So the reason why this is personification is because the trees literally do not dance. Trees cannot dance. They do not have legs. They do not have ears to listen to music. They don't have a brain to tell their legs and their arms to move around to song or music or beats. So that's literally impossible. Okay? In the book, The Honest Truth, the character Mark talks a lot about pain, and he describes pain as having sharp claws. I always think that one's like a really clever way to put that something really hurts. So he says, you don't have to write this down, but just something, he's like, the pain was clawing down my back. So this makes it personification because pain is a non-human object. So this is not human. Therefore, it cannot claw because it doesn't have hands. So that's a really cool representation of personification. Okay, so All of these we're going to see, all of these you guys are going to be assessed on in quizzes and assignments while we read the honest truth, and then we'll circle back to these two when we talk about poetry later in the year. When you are done filling these out, you were going to put these in the study section of your binder.